There are moments in life when the world grows so loud that you cannot hear yourself anymore. The laughter of others feels sharper than your own silence, the ticking of the clock echoes louder than your beating heart, and even the wind outside your window carries 1,000 restless voices. In that kind of noise, a person forgets who they are. And that was exactly where Emily Parker found herself, sitting on the edge of her bed one quiet evening, her hands pressed against her face, wondering when her life had slipped out of her grasp. Emily was 32 years old, though she often felt far older. She had been through enough heartbreak and disappointments to weigh down a soul twice her age. Once upon a time, she had been filled with dreams of building a career she loved, of falling in love with someone who would hold her hand through storms, of finding meaning in the small things, of laughing without pretending. But somewhere between chasing deadlines, surviving breakups, and carrying the invisible weight of expectations, she had lost that fire. Her apartment was quiet that night, but it was not the peace of silence, it was the emptiness of it. She had ended a long relationship 6 months ago, a relationship she thought would end at the altar, not in shattered trust. He had promised forever but left with nothing more than a careless goodbye. And in the weeks that followed, Emily buried herself in work, thinking that busyness would drown her sorrow. It did not. Instead, it buried her deeper into exhaustion, until one morning she looked at herself in the mirror and hardly recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were dull, her lips dry, her laughter forced. She had friends, yes, but the kind who asked if she was okay, in passing, not the kind who stayed long enough to hear the truth. She went to family dinners where she smiled politely while listening to endless questions about when she would finally settle down, as if her worth existed only in someone else's embrace. She scrolled through social media, staring at pictures of people who seemed endlessly happy, vacations, engagements, promotions, glowing skin and perfect lives, and though she knew deep inside that much of it was pretend, she could not help but compare her hollow days to their colorful moments. That night, sitting in her dimly lit apartment, she whispered to herself, "I don't know who I am anymore." And that was the truest thing she had said in months. But sometimes, rock bottom is not the end, it is the beginning. The turning point came unexpectedly. Emily had taken a walk late at night, unable to sleep. The streets were quiet, the city holding its breath under the blanket of darkness. She wandered aimlessly, her hands tucked into her jacket pockets, her heart heavy but strangely alert. Then, as she turned a corner near the park, she saw an old man sitting on a bench, his back straight, his hands folded neatly in his lap. He looked to be in his 70s, maybe older, and his eyes were lifted toward the stars with such calmness that it made Emily stop in her tracks. Something about him felt different, not fragile, not defeated, but quietly powerful, as though life had tried to break him 100 times and failed. She sat down at the far end of the bench, keeping her distance, but the man noticed her presence. He turned slightly and smiled, a kind smile, the kind you don't see often anymore. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked gently. Emily hesitated before nodding. "Yeah, just too much noise in my head." The man chuckled softly. "Noise," he repeated. "That's what the world does best. It fills our days with so much noise that we forget the music inside us." Something in those words pierced through Emily like a light in the dark. She looked at him, searching his face, but he didn't explain further. He just sat there, peaceful, as though silence was his oldest friend. "Do you ever feel lost?" she asked, her voice trembling without meaning to. The old man's eyes softened. "I've been lost many times. Lost my wife when I was 52. Lost my business when I was 38. Lost my health for a while, too. But you know what I learned? Being lost doesn't mean you're gone. It just means you're on a road you don't understand yet. If you keep walking, the road always leads somewhere." Emily swallowed hard, her eyes burning. "And what if I'm too tired to walk?" "Then rest," the man said simply. "Rest. Sit down. Be still. Let the silence hold you until you have the strength to rise again. You don't always have to fight. Sometimes, surviving the night is enough." Those words settled into her heart like seeds. She sat there in silence with him, staring at the stars, feeling for the first time in months that maybe silence wasn't her enemy. Maybe it was her teacher. The next morning, Emily woke up and instead of reaching for her phone, she just sat at the edge of her bed and breathed. The world was still noisy, the traffic outside, the unanswered emails waiting for her, the weight of responsibilities, but something small had shifted inside her. She began to carve out little moments of stillness each day. 5 minutes in the morning with her coffee, watching the steam rise. 10 minutes before bed, sitting by the window, listening to nothing but her own breath. Slowly, painfully, she started to rediscover herself. It wasn't easy. Some days, the silence brought more pain than peace. Memories surfaced, her ex's laughter, her father's disappointed sighs, her own failures replaying like old films. But instead of running from them, she began to face them. She cried when she needed to. She forgave herself for not being perfect. She started writing in a small journal, pouring out the words she had buried for too long. Weeks turned into months, and though her life didn't magically transform, Emily began to notice small changes. She smiled a little more genuinely. She took walks without rushing. She started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. She reached out to an old friend, not to pretend she was okay, but to say, "I need someone to talk to." And for the first time, she let someone in. The silence was teaching her. It was teaching her that healing is not loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or applause. Healing is quiet. It's in the moments when you choose to breathe instead of break, when you whisper to yourself, "I can try again tomorrow." It's in the way you begin to notice the sun through your window, the kindness in a stranger's smile, the way your own heart keeps beating even when you thought it was too heavy to go on. One evening, Emily returned to the same park, to the same bench, hoping to see the old man again. He wasn't there. She waited, but he never came. And somehow, that felt right. Because maybe he was never meant to stay. Maybe he was only meant to remind her that silence is not emptiness, it's a space where hope can be reborn. Emily sat on that bench alone, but she didn't feel lonely this time. She looked at the stars, and instead of asking for answers, she whispered a quiet thank you. Thank you for the pain that had taught her strength. Thank you for the silence that had taught her to listen. Thank you for the hope that was slowly, quietly, returning. Life didn't stop being hard. She still had bills to pay, still had days where she doubted herself, still had moments where the world's noise tried to drown her again. But now, she carried a new strength inside her, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that speaks in silence. Emily Parker was no longer the woman who whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." She was the woman who could now say, with quiet conviction, "I am still becoming." And that is enough. And maybe, that's what life truly is, not a race, not a performance, not a checklist of achievements. Life is the courage to sit in the silence, to embrace the struggles, to heal slowly, and to keep walking even when the road is uncertain. Because in that silence, in that stillness, in that fragile yet powerful space, the heart finds its way back home. And in that silence, Emily found herself again.